Around the same time of anti-natalist conference, there was an opposite conference, which was Natal conference, about like pro-natalist conference, held on 1st and 2nd of December in Austin, Texas. And on the screen, what you see is the summary of that conference. I described anti-natalist conference as content dense. If I have to describe this natal conference in similar one or two words, I would say disappointing. There's a lot of disappointing material on this. Before we look at that, some highlights of that, I also want to look at the associations of this conference. For one, the summary is published on a website called American Renaissance. American Renaissance, if you actually try and open this link, you will get an error which says that the website is unsafe. The website is safe, but the reason you get this sort of error is because the poster herself has said that link is not unsafe. It's just that American Renaissance is considered a hate group by people like SPLC. Why is it that? You can see that in the About Us section of American Renaissance, the approach they follow or they want or they preach for is what is called as race realism. Race realism, as far as I understand, is just a word to hide that you are a racist. When somebody identifies themselves as race realist, they are actually a racist person, is my understanding. I might be wrong, open to correction, but that's what generally is accepted. And that's why I think this website is also cringed upon by many of the routers. Nonetheless, if you still open the link and go through the summary, you would find a lot of disappointing material. Before we go into the actual arguments, I also want to look at the comments on this summary, the top comments. I'm just scrolling to the comments part here. The top liked comment here is by somebody called Guest. They are talking about the endocrine disruptors is part or disturbing is part is disturbing. So endocrine disruptors are the chemicals found in environment which disrupt your endocrine system, which has impact on your fertility capabilities and so on. What he says is that, however, I think the rest could be handled if we just enforced our borders. We start getting a hint of where this is going. So long as our population, and so far I don't know who our here is, but so long as our population isn't replaced by non-whites, I am not so alarmed about our numbers shrinking somewhat. We're just looking at the comments here, not the content of the summary. And the next, the reply to that, which also got a good number of likes, is that I agree. I do want white fertility to return back to a replacement level, which is 2.1. We must. But I am far more concerned and passionate about getting non whites out of the country versus whites having nine child families everywhere. This is the association. One is the website on which the summary is published, the people who are attracted toward this. Now, you might say that a movement should not be characterized by the people it attracts, which is partly true. We should look at the arguments made for the movement. And I have looked at the arguments, I've gone through this entire summary. Most of it is disappointing. I'm not going to go through this entire thing, it's going to take a long time. But I want to highlight only a few things. One is the organizer of this conference. Let me just scroll to the part where it talks about the organizer. So, Kevin Dolan, who is the organizer of this conference. I have talked about Kevin Dolan, and he has publicly said that the pro-natalist policies, or at least the ones he advocates, the pro-natalist ideas, are aligned with eugenics. That's what he had said. I also had talked about it in one of the weekly updates and showed the video, him talking that thing directly. Nonetheless, he was also one of the speakers at the conference. He talked about various different pro-natalist things before concluding with this sort of sentence. Life is beautiful, he concluded, and we must make sure it continues. This is taking advantage of an ambiguity. One is, whose life are we saying is beautiful? If I say that my life is beautiful to me and therefore I feel that it should continue, that might be an argument we can accept. But I think they are talking life in general of humans and beyond. So if you look at life of humans, who is that beautiful for? Is it beautiful for those humans? Look around, look at the hospitals in the world, look at the war that is going on, look at the injustice that is going on. You might argue that the quality of human life has improved over the years compared to the history. But to claim that life in general is beautiful, I think is still an overstatement. And if you start including animals, other animals than just humans into that, you get worse results very fast. Like look at the slaughterhouses, look at the factory farms, the dairy industries. If you think that, okay, those are created by humans, so we should not really consider them, they should go away. Look at wild animals. There are many nature lovers. Imagine that you are on a bank of a river, the flowing stream of water, there is mountains, there is green, lush plantation, birds and bees singing. It all looks nice and beautiful. You feel pleasant. But think from the perspective of the beings who are living in that beautiful nature. Is that beautiful for them? All of the beings in this so-called nature are constantly threatened by starvation, predation, disease, all sorts of suffering. So I don't know how we can say that their life is beautiful for them. It's only from my perspective I can see that they are beautiful. So then the other problem is, even if you accept, notwithstanding my clarification, that life is beautiful in general, I can't see the logical leap, how you can take this logical leap of accepting that life is beautiful and therefore it must continue. The other problem is, what must continue exactly? Does it mean that the existing living beings should continue to live? They would eventually die for good or bad reasons, mostly for bad reasons. But they would continue to live, and even antinatalists are not for killing existing living beings. But I think what they mean here is that it's not those individual living beings who should continue to live who would eventually die, but it's the notions which are built around this life in general, like notions of species, notions of groups, of nations, of cultures, which should continue to live in form of what they call as this life. And the problem with that is that these are notions, they are not actually living sentient beings. For them to continue, we are crushing in the way, as a means, the actual individual beings who are sentient and are going to suffer. That is the problem with these sorts of ambiguous statements. And I think I don't have time, but I can talk about each and every sentence mentioned in this summary at this length to, to find the holes in that. I won't do that. The other point I want to highlight is by a speaker called Charles Hwood. So Charles Hwood, I'm just scrolling down to his part of the summary. Charles Hwood, here it is. Charles Hwood talked about the need for men-only spaces. Masculinity, he says, is in crisis. There are too many feminized men. What is it? What is a man? He says a man provides, protects, competes, is decisive and prone to action. Competition is central to masculinity. When a man walks up to a group of men, at least part of his brain is asking, can I kick these guys' asses? All these aspects of masculinity go into making babies. Now, what I think is going on here is appeal to nature. That's the fallacy. We have a lot of attitudes and behaviors and mindsets and instincts as a result of natural selection and evolutionary history. For example, aggression is one of those. What we should do is, okay, that is the limitation through natural selection. We should evaluate whether those are morally and ethically justified before accepting them as good behaviors. And I think what Charles Heywood is doing is just accepting them as they are without even doing any moral evaluation around them. And then this leads to this sort of, violent attitudes which are justified. He, for example, says that men need spaces that are only for men, and women should stay out of it. Even so, he talks about low testosterone groups such as these, and these also need spaces. But he says, but the best groups of building men are based on masculine pursuits, hunting trips, gun clubs, canoe expeditions, jiu-jitsu and boxing clubs. Now, I don't have anything against canoe expeditions, jiu-jitsu and boxing clubs, really. But hunting trips and gun clubs are unnecessarily violent. And if you're using that to build up your masculinity, that I think is going to result in a toxic masculinity rather than a healthy masculinity. But anyway, that is what they say. The other point I want to highlight is workspaces used to be functionally segregated by sex, used to be in the past. We should go back to that. On the job, men should be able to favor each other for promotion, which essentially means that we should discriminate against women, especially men with families, which also essentially means we should discriminate against child women. Unfortunately, that's against the law. all anti-discrimination laws should be abolished. I'm not surprised that this website is, frowned upon by many routers. This is the sort of speakers that this conference had got. This gives you an idea of, what level of conference this was as compared to the philosophical arguments made in the anti-natalist conference.